One of the most striking aspects of the Royal Air Force is the diversity of its aircraft. But that simply reflects the vast range of jobs the service has to do and be ready to do at a moment's notice. The Cold War may be over, but it's left behind it a world that is less predictable and in many places less stable. Now Britain, her allies and her interests overseas are faced with threats of many different kinds. So the RAF has to be able to respond swiftly and effectively to those threats, wherever they come from. Preventing escalation in a dangerous situation by projecting air power, and, if necessary, countering force with superior force and skill. And all the time, the RAF has to retain its fighting edge by keeping pace in its equipment and its training with the changing face of the modern battlefield. In addition, we must also maintain the capability to help those in need. And all this must be done cost-effectively. That's why we work increasingly in joint structures with the Royal Navy and Army. That makes more efficient use of Britain's national defence resources and increases their operational impact. The Royal Air Force's key task within those joint structures is to be ready to deliver flexible air power to meet any challenge it might face, just as it always has. In World War I, the height, speed and reach of aeroplanes led quickly to their use in different ways: for ground support and reconnaissance, for air defense, and for maintaining air superiority over the battlefield. This flexibility of use was extended in the 1920s and 30s as aircraft development made huge strides. Then, in the dark early days of World War II, the most pressing task was once again air defense, in the decisive period in 1940, now known as the Battle of Britain. But the RAF had other significant roles to play as well. Maritime patrol, taking the fight into the enemy's heartland, bringing troops and equipment into battle, and giving them close support on the ground. And those were tasks performed in every theatre of operations. By 1945, there had been two technological developments that radically changed the face of warfare. The advent of jet aircraft was a huge leap forward for air power, and nuclear weapons cast their shadow across the long but uneasy peace of the Cold War, in which the RAF was, for many years, the keeper of Britain's strategic nuclear deterrent. The steadfastness of the NATO alliance saw its reward in the collapse of the communist bloc, with the RAF a vital part of Britain's efforts. But even before that, there were new threats to be turned aside. In the Falklands campaign, air power had to be projected across huge distances, and in ways that were the precursors of the joint forces of today. Then, at the start of the 1990s, air power demonstrated its full potential. Within 48 hours of Iraq invading Kuwait, RAF and Allied aircraft had arrived in the region. When the counterattack known as Desert Storm began, it was overwhelming air power that created the conditions for a swift and comprehensive victory on the ground. RAF aircraft were involved in every aspect of operations. In particular, the RAF's ability to mount high-speed, low-level strikes against airfields and missile sites deep inside enemy territory proved devastating. And its low-level reconnaissance capability was unique, as it still is. In today's world, it's a regrettable fact that all three services have to be prepared for more such operations. For everywhere there are conflicts and fragile ceasefires and simmering discontent waiting to explode into fighting. not just in the Gulf, although we've had to intervene there on more than one occasion, but in Asia, Africa, and even within Europe itself, in Bosnia and Kosovo. The RAF has to be ready to deploy aircraft and other resources to any crisis area anywhere in the world. Aircraft such as Harriers, able to destroy targets in terrain that would be virtually inaccessible to ground forces, even when ground forces have been committed, which is by no means always the case. Providing logistic support with tactical transport aircraft like the Hercules and helicopters such as the Chinook. The RAF maintains a quick reaction photo reconnaissance capability. It has the sophisticated Sentry to monitor airspace in places like the Balkans and the no-fly zones of northern and southern Iraq, and Jaguars and Tornadoes to enforce compliance with those zones. And the RAF's tanker force increases the flexibility and reach of its forces still further. In many such cases, we operate in coalition with our allies, or on behalf of the wider international community. But increasingly, we also operate alongside the Royal Navy and the Army in joint formations such as the Joint Rapid Reaction Force, ready to deal with precisely the sort of crisis that this unsettled world produces so regularly. The Royal Navy's fixed-wing aircraft are being brought together with the RAF's Harriers to form Joint Force 2000. Ground-based air defense will be jointly managed by the RAF and the Army. Initial helicopter training and the operation and support of all battlefield helicopters have also been brought together under a tri-service command. The RAF's Space Operations Squadron controls the Skynet satellite network for all three services. And in the maritime arena, Nimrods provide airborne reconnaissance and surveillance in support of naval operations in peace and war. But it is not only as a fighting service that the RAF is a force for good in the world. We contribute to society in many different ways. Search and rescue helicopters are on constant standby around the UK, called out some 1,300 times in a typical year. They are supplemented over water by the Nimrod's massive search capability. And the RAF also has highly skilled mountain rescue teams ready to move into action whenever needed. This humanitarian effort has become a worldwide activity. Whether a disaster has been caused by nature or by man is not material. When tasked, we'll be there providing aid, just as we did half a century ago, supplying the people of Berlin when their land routes to the west were blockaded. And just as we did only a few years ago, when the people of Sarajevo were in a similar predicament. None of this long list of roles that the RAF performs, however, would be possible without the skills and motivation of its people. They're drawn from every part of the diverse society they serve and are trained to the highest levels of expertise, giving them a range of skills that will be equally valuable when they eventually return to civilian life, as well as offering them many other opportunities. At the center of the training, naturally, is flying training. For the professionalism that the public only occasionally glimpses is the end product of a thorough and well-proven process. And continuation training is equally essential to maintain the RAF's readiness for immediate deployment to any kind of operation. That's why, although low-flying training in the UK has been considerably reduced, it remains vital. In many circumstances, a low and fast approach is the only way to mount attacks while keeping risk to the aircrew to a minimum. Since those attacks will often need to be carried out at night, pilots must also practice using specialized night flying equipment. In addition, Army support invariably requires low-flying skills. and they are often essential in humanitarian aid operations. But highly skilled pilots, important as they are just the most conspicuous members of the RAF team. There are other aircrew. And those who provide the links to the ground. Those who keep the aircraft flying. And a wide variety of other specialists. And to increase the RAF's flexibility, many of the support services are organized in mobile units that can move to a crisis area as promptly as the frontline aircraft. However, good people need good equipment. In order to maintain and enhance its operational effectiveness, the RAF continually improves and upgrades its current equipment, obtaining value for money from its past investment. At the same time, we plan to re-equip with cutting-edge technology. So, over the next few years, we're introducing the world-class Eurofighter, the flexible Merlin, and a Hercules so advanced it's practically a new design, with a suitable strategic lift aircraft following shortly afterwards. Alongside the aircraft comes the next generation of air-to-air missiles and a new range of air-to-ground weapons to give us even greater flexibility in terms of choice of weapon, delivery height, and launch distance from targets. Further ahead, there will be a need to replace the Tornado, and we're considering options which could include a mix of manned and unmanned aircraft. The Royal Air Force is proud of its past as the roots of all it does today. We practice and prepare constantly for whatever the future may bring. Together with our sister services, we're ready 24 hours a day to deploy as the UK's contribution to the cause of peace and freedom in a very uncertain world. Our job is to project flexible air power quickly and effectively, anywhere it's needed, anytime. That's the Royal Air Force today.